Hey, how you doing? Davidpaulides, Canada Missing Project, copyrighted edition for our YouTube page, and I'm back at you again. And thank you very much for the kind response you guys have given to the missing people that I've put up here. Yes, it does bother me a lot. It does affect me a lot, and I do have some definite downer times. So your comments are greatly appreciated on our site, and pushing this site out to people so that they can understand what's happening and the lack of understanding with missing people, huge issue to me, huge. Some people have asked me, Dave, it's pretty obvious you're a patriot. I'm a huge patriot. I believe in the United States. I know what it's given to me and my family. I understand how important safety is, and the number one issue that our government is to give to us is safety. And if they can't provide a safe environment for us, then we need to get rid of the government, or you need to change the government, or we need to change the politicians that are doing this. But we're paying our taxes to have police, fire, paramedics. And if it's not happening in your area, vote them out. Get rid of them. They're not doing the job. And if they're not reflecting your ideas and morals, then we need to get rid of them. And I'm with you on that. I don't care what side of the spectrum you're on. Everyone has a right to their voice being heard. So today we're going to talk about 3 physicians. And we talked about some things last week about people falling, apparently falling, or being dropped. I don't care what you want to call it. But before we get too deep into this video, if you haven't watched it yet, very early in the production of this site, of this YouTube site for me, I filmed a segment with my son, Ben. We hiked into an area across from Vail, Colorado, and a physician named Dr. James Mcgrogan disappeared. And we hiked into the area where his body was found, and we filmed a lengthy segment there. And we were on site, so you can go back, and I want you to watch it before you watch this segment. So stop, go back. I'll put the link right under the description of the video here, or on a pinned link for the first response on this video, so you can find Mcgrogan. But if you look under history of the Canada Missing Project, or 60 plus videos, it's near the beginning. Dr. James Mcgrogan. I'll come back. Okay, talking about Mcgrogan. He's an emergency room physician, and a guy who wasn't given things to him easily. He worked hard to become a physician. He wanted to be a physician, and eventually in life he got it. He was also an athlete. He was a runner. And he was in extremely good shape when he took off with his friends to go on this ski hike up on the other side of Vail across from I-70. The man was extremely well prepared. And I don't say this lightly. I tell people, when you go out into the outdoors, go prepared. Well, he had a phone and he had extra batteries. Why is that important? Because the entire area that he would have been in had cell reception, but his cell phone was turned off. He had an avalanche beacon, he had a shovel, he had a tent. He could have holed up for days, a week, and been fine. Well, when he disappeared, they searched for him with helicopters, drones. They threw everything they had at finding this guy, and for good reason. He's a huge person of the community, and when they couldn't find him, they were stumped, because they know when he left his friends to go off earlier, he told them exactly where he was going. And his friends knew that the trail was obvious, it was well worn, and there was snow all around. And if you left the trail, you'd make a mark in the snow going off to the side so everyone would see you taking off. Well, there were no trails taken off from the main trail. That was number one. So searchers were stumped about where he could have gone. And people said, well, if maybe he took off to the east or to the west. Well, he would have looked like a snowplow going through virgin snow and easily be seen by helicopter. But none of those trails were seen. And it snowed while he was gone eventually. And then he's found very far east from where he disappeared, where we filmed that segment. Blunt force trauma. He was dropped right near a creek. Nobody can explain why or how he got there. Search and rescue people were stumped. They don't understand how he got point to point without leaving tracks, or how he would have even gotten to this location if he would have done tracks, because it was so tough, so difficult. Mcgrogan's case is an important one for a couple of reasons. First of all, the blunt force trauma to the head. He had injuries, other injuries, but that was the one that killed him. And he was wearing a helmet. Remember that. So something grabbed him, something had him for 2 weeks, because he would have turned on his phone. To get to the point from where he disappeared to where he was found would have taken him probably 4 or 5 days of rugged hiking while he was lost, and he could have turned on his phone and called for help, but that didn't happen. Tons of things about that bothered me while I was there. First of all, it's an ultimately beautiful place. And James, Dr. James Mcgrogan, James was there to be with his buddies, other physicians. They knew he was super, super reliable. He wouldn't just take off and leave them. Another bad part of the story. And his dad had a difficult time understanding what happened, as did everybody. So that was the first case. Let's go to the next case. Dr. John Marshall. So James Mcgrogan is 39. Dr. John Marshall was 49. He went missing January 25th, 2015 at 5:33 in the morning in Spokane, Washington. He was the head of surgery for the Veterans Administration in Spokane. He was a U.S. Marine captain. He first went to school at the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine. He then did a general surgery residency in York, Pennsylvania. He then did a stint in Islamabad in Afghanistan as a combat surgeon. His wife, Suzanne, is also a physician. They were married. They live in the outskirts of Spokane. On January 25th, 2015, he woke up early and he drove to the YMCA in downtown Spokane, and he entered the building at 5:19 in the morning. And this is something he did every day. This wasn't like an unusual event. He was an athlete. He was a runner, just like Dr. Mcgrogan. And they have him on CCTV leaving the building at 5:33 a.m. He changed into running shorts, a coat, an iPod with some headphones, and running shoes, and he left. That morning, it was cold outside. They called it a freezing fog, but the police said the streets were not icy and the sidewalks were not icy. And he took off for a run. The next time anything happens is 9 a.m. at the Veterans Administration when John is scheduled for surgery. And his partners and things are looking for him and they can't find him. Well, they eventually called Suzanne, his wife, and she drives down to the YMCA. She starts looking around. She sees his car in the parking lot. They pull the tape and they see him leaving at 5:33, and she calls Spokane police, and that's where the investigation starts. And Spokane stated that they wanted to put a helicopter in the sky to look for him, but they couldn't because of the fog, weather issue. Well, nothing happens. They searched that river from top to bottom all during the day. They tried to interview people. There were no witnesses, nothing. January 26th at 8:58 a.m., A person at 1116 Riverside Drive makes a call of a body in the water. Spokane PD respond, and they find Dr. Marshall. Marshall Mcgrogan. It gets confusing. I'm sorry, it's a respectful thing, and I don't mean to disrespect these men. So Dr. Marshall's found in the water, and he's found face up. Not normal, folks. Highly not normal. Men die in water, and they come up face up. Men die in water, go face down. Women die in water, go face up. It's like 99% of the time it's that way. And in the cases I've chronicled in Missing 411, A Sobering Coincidence, the vast majority of the men are found face up, which makes no sense. Something's wrong here. So they also find that inside of his coat pocket, an iPod, like an MP3 player, and the headphones there. And they take the body out of the water. It's Dr. Marshall. And they take it to the coroner's office, and they start a process of trying to understand what happened. Well, they find out that things aren't as evident as they seem. There's a detective named Cessnick that gets the case, and I'm telling you, I'm not easy to praise people, but this detective did a heck of a job. So Dr. Marshall is found in the river that goes through downtown Spokane, just below these massive falls. And when you go through the falls, you get beat up pretty bad, and you pick up vegetation from the falls on your clothing and on your body. And that's the first thing that the coroner determined that was odd. There was none of this vegetation on the body. And it wasn't beat up. He had 2 broken ribs and a broken sternum. But the detectives start searching, and they can't find an area where there's a broken rail, or there's a dirt slide, or footprints going down to the water. They can't find anything about how Dr. Marshall, got in the water. And it bothered him. And they had a difficult time with this. Well, Susan, the wife, hired a private investigator, a former law enforcement guy named Ted Pulver. Ted and I talked on a couple different occasions. And in his words, it is the most baffling case he's ever seen in his life. Some people thought that Dr. Marshall was maybe beat up and thrown in the river and died. I don't believe it. Other people say that it was a possible case of suicide. Well, I still don't understand how you commit suicide by jumping in a river, because he could swim. And Cessnick said, I can't determine what caused Dr. Marshall's death. A key point. The coroner did determine that the cause of death was freshwater drowning. Okay, I get that. But where was the body for the previous 24 hours? And when a detective of Cessnick's quality says that, I'm listening. And everyone agreed that the MP3 player that was in his coat pocket, if he had gone over those falls, would have come out. And for sure, the earbuds would have come off. But none of that happened. Meaning he was right in that position, had to be for 24 hours, supposedly. I don't believe it. I don't think he was there very long at all. Again, no witnesses ever saw anything until the call the morning of his body was being found. So one case doesn't really mean a lot, but you start putting 2 cases together, it should mean something. There's no doubt in my mind that Dr. Marshall fell into that water or was dropped. And why? So Dr. Marshall just wasn't like your normal guy. And this is a picture of him in his combat attire. He committed himself to our country. Did time in combat as a surgeon, probably saved hundreds of lives of soldiers. He went to the Veterans Administration in 2005 and was made head of surgery for Spokane's Veteran Administration. Stellar individual. Ran every day to stay in shape. Now, this is the location where his body was found, in the river, next to the bank, face up. MP3 player in the pocket of his coat with the earbuds still attached. I don't believe it. And I know that the detective, Cessnick from Spokane, stated in the report he had a really tough time with this case. So this is one of those instances where the jurisdiction gave me the whole report and a ton of photos. And not many of the photos are very relevant, so I didn't even print them out and show them to you because they're not that good. But they didn't conceal anything. They wanted this transparent. And I give my nod to Detective Cessnick for doing a hell of a job on this case and recognizing something was wrong. No, I don't believe he was beat up. No, I don't think he was attacked. And he would have been... Dr. Marshall was no pushover. He was a combat veteran. He's trained. He was in excellent shape. Case bothered me. It still bothers me a lot. And I did have communication with Suzanne. She did contact me about it. She thinks he was attacked. But on these cases, I understand why people think these things. But I'm looking at it from 50,000 feet, and they're looking at it from ground level, one incident. I'm looking at it from many incidents. So you got Mcgrogan, you got Marshall. Let's talk about another case. Dr. Christopher Robert is 50 years old, December 5th, 2015. About 11 months after Dr. Marshall disappeared and drowned and died. It's a case of Dr. Chris Robert. And he was an anesthesiologist in Minneapolis, St. Paul. He was born in Clare Shore, Michigan, right on the banks of the Great Lakes. And nothing was given to this man. Another person who just worked his way up through the ranks, up through life to meet his dream of becoming a physician. He was smart. He learned to fly an airplane. And then he got his instructor's ratings to fly. And he made his way through school by teaching others how to fly. That's how he paid his way. He wasn't given anything. And while he was becoming in undergrad and through school and learning to fly, he also became a firefighter paramedic, giving back to the community. Another stellar guy. So when he was done with that, he applied and he went to medical school where he met his wife, another physician, and he did his residency at the University of Minnesota. And he was eventually hired in 2010 as chief of anesthesiology for Hennepin County Medical Center. He had 2 kids. And I should say that Dr. Marshall had kids as well. And it's a huge loss for them. So on December 4th, 2015, Dr. Robert attends a department party at a location called Libertine. And Libertine is a restaurant at 3000 Hennepin Avenue, and you might want to look that up. And the doctor had an apartment with his wife in the 200 block of 11th Street downtown. And he did this so he didn't have to drive all the way home. If he had an emergency in the middle of the night, he could just go to his apartment and sleep. Well, at about midnight, or thereabouts, the party ends, and everyone says, hey, Dr. Roberts was just fine, giving people hugs, thank yous, and says, hey, I'm just going to walk back to my apartment. It's not that far. And he goes, I need the exercise. So he takes off, midnight. It's the last time anybody sees him. 7:45 the next morning, the Minnesota Highway Patrol gets a call of a body on the freeway in downtown Minneapolis, right next to the Groveland exit. And they arrive and they find a person deceased. It's Dr. Robert. And the Highway Patrol immediately stated it was not a hit and run. And they had a difficult time understanding what in the heck they were looking at because it didn't make any sense. It was obvious that the person was deceased from some type of head injury in the middle of the road, but hadn't been hit by a car. So how'd they get there? Where'd they come from? In the middle of downtown Minneapolis, St. Paul. If you've ever driven there, there's tons of traffic. There's no witnesses. They actually put an ad in the newspaper with this information. Not one witness came forward and saw anything. How can that be? So the police came out and made a statement that there were no witnesses, and they couldn't understand where Dr. Roberts' body came from, meaning where it fell from to get its critical injuries. There were no answers. The better question is, where was Dr. Robert for 7 hours or more? He was last seen about midnight. They find him at almost 8 o'clock the next morning in the middle of a freeway. Where'd he come from? They said he fell, but there's no place to fall from. So again, I go back to being dropped. And I again ask you, from ground level, this doesn't make any sense. When you look at it from a Minnesota Highway Patrol, and eventually the Minneapolis City Police took over because it was a criminal, they thought it might have been a criminal case. They're thinking, what have they got here? Well, the coroner states he died of blunt force trauma to the head. Familiar? And also acute alcohol intoxication. Well, in Missing 411, A Sobering Coincidence, I chronicled a whole series of men that died in the water or under the influence of alcohol. I wrote about this story on Dr. Robert in Missing 411 Off the Grid because people had stated that he walked away from that party. He was fine. And at that time of night, there was nowhere to go to get more alcohol, and nobody could understand where he could have gotten more alcohol in the middle of the night or where he was all night. It's confusing, bothersome. Now, all of these incidents I just described to you, no witnesses. In Dr. Marshall and Dr. Mcgrogan's case, the areas were previously searched. And while we can't say the highway was searched, tens of thousands of people went up and down it for 7 hours and never reported a body, so it wasn't there. Point of separation. Dr. Mcgrogan left his friends on the trail across from Vail. He was fine and alive and ready to go. Dr. Marshall leaves the YMCA on camera, and he's fine. Dr. Robert leaves the party, he's fine. And then something happens to all three of these men. Now, in Dr. Roberts' case, 2 miles away is the Mississippi River. And I have written about that river many times in Sobering Coincidence and in other books. And Minneapolis-St. Paul is a cluster zone of missing people on a variety of troublesome issues and cases. And Dr. Robert was another addition to that case. Now, these are just 3 physicians I've told you about. They were all runners. They were all brilliant. They were all self-made. They weren't given anything. And because of that, there was something different about these guys. And not everybody I write about I have the utmost respect for. These 3 men I do. I mean, I would have liked to be friends with any of them. And there were no easy answers on any of these cases. Dr. Mcgrogan's case, the search and rescue gave an interview afterwards in Vail, in Eagle County, search and rescue, and they were troubled. They were troubled. That area he was in was searched. It was looked at, and he wasn't found. So how suddenly did his body show up? Dr. Marshall, that river area was searched. His body wasn't there. And it hadn't come down those falls, per the coroner and per the detective. So how did it suddenly arrive there at 8 o'clock in the morning without anybody saying it come? And nobody dropped it in? Somebody would have seen this. Dr. Robert, how does his body all of a sudden end up in the middle of a freeway and no one sees anything? Again, I think that's part of the elements of these incidents. No witnesses. Alone. Dr. Chris Robert, was him next to his plane. Self-made flight instructor. Great guy. Cared about people. Probably saved thousands of lives in his career as a paramedic, firefighter, and eventually an anesthesiologist for Hennepin County Medical Center. Yes, I'm troubled by these. So we're going to try something different right now. And that is, since we're near the end of the video, a lot of you have said, hey, Dave, just turn the comments section off and don't let people post nasty things. Well, up until right now, I have personally gone through every one of those comments, read them, and taken off all the nasty comments. And I think that's one reason why the comment section has blossomed, because you know that you can post something, your own thoughts and ideas, and I'm not going to let somebody come on and slam you rudely. An exchange of thoughts, ideas, different opinions, that's great. But some of the absolutely vulgar things that are printed, you don't need to see them. I don't need to see them either, but I do. So we're going to try something different this time. First of all, I am absolutely swamped right now, thanks to you. Starting Monday, December 7th, it's the official release date of my book, Missing 411 Montana. And many of you have pre-ordered the book, and we're working like dogs trying to make sure that they get out on time. So I'm not going to have any time to review these comments for several days. So if you make a comment, understand that it's probably not going to get posted for a while. If it does, it may not even get posted because I may be too busy. But anyhow, the link to look at my book and get an understanding of what Missing 411 Montana is about, I'll be on that pinned statement, the number one statement, or under description of the book. And boy, I tell you, the response has been huge. And the biggest difference between now and a year ago when I released the last book is that I've really made an effort to communicate with people more on this platform. So I have to thank you for the huge response to the book offering and mutual support. I really don't have time to even do this video, but I did it, and I did it because I think there's a dual friendship here. I appreciate what you're doing for me. I know you appreciate what I'm doing for you as far as the educational process and telling you about these stories. Each one of these guys, Mcgrogan, Marshall, Dr. Robert, they all have wives, they all have kids, they all had families. And I can tell you that there's not a night that goes by that I don't think about the people I've written about. And these men, without them, when we got hurt, who would we go to? And I can tell their wives and families that I hope I've shown them in a respectful light, and I know that when I wrote about them, that it was a heartfelt writing, and I cared about the way I presented it. So thanks a million for hanging with me. 3 physicians all disappeared under mysterious circumstances, and they're in my heart, and keep them in yours. Have a good week.